Welcome back. If this is the first video that you're watching, not a problem. I would encourage you, however, to go and watch episode 1. It gives an introduction and also what this series is about. This is episode 2, and so if you're watching this first, again, no problem. Just go back and catch the other one. There are 4 in total, so yeah, watching them in order is the best thing to do. We're going to pick off where we left off. Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane with his disciples. It was late at night, probably midnight, 1, maybe 2, somewhere in there. They were there a couple of hours. Jesus was in anguish, in agony, so he was praying off by himself. He comes back and he finds the disciples sleeping. He says, "Can you not keep watch for an hour? Pray with me." He goes off and he prays some more, and because of this mental anguish, because of the intense mental contemplation, the engaging of battle in his mind about his future, as in the cross, as in dying, was heavily weighing on his mind, so much so that the small capillaries in the sweat glands burst because of the pressure, causing his sweat to have blood mixed in with it, a condition that we now know as hematidrosis. So by this time, I would estimate between 2 and 4 in the morning. Okay, Jesus hasn't slept since the night before, so he's beginning to feel some fatigue. Dehydration was also in the early stages of developing, only to be slightly accelerated by the loss of blood that he's been experiencing. But there is still, as we will see, so much more to come. Judas, one of his disciples, was about to betray him. Soldiers come, they arrest Jesus in the garden. Over the next couple of hours, probably till somewhere 6:37 in the morning, there's trials, questions, accusations, silence, some sort of rough handling. And this whole time, they're going back and forth. It doesn't seem like anybody wants to take responsibility. All of this adds to the lack of sleep, the lack of, or the growing thirst that Jesus has. Eventually, then, after a weak-willed Pilate lets the crowd decide, Jesus is sent to be flogged and then crucified. But the flogging and the crucifixion, those are 2 separate things. Those deserve their own episodes. For now, I want to focus on the Crown of Thorns. The Crown of Thorns would come after the flogging or the scourging, but before the actual crucifixion. This was not a crown of gold or gems, simply of thorns. Certainly no crown that would be desired by any king. Thorns from local plants or bushes would be plaited or wrapped around in a ring fashion to cover the head of Jesus. Probably most of the head, not just a ring like we would see in the movies. Probably the whole head. And without going into Holy Land botany, it would suffice to say that these thorns were nasty. Although we don't know specifically which thorn plant they would have come from, they were probably 1 to 2 inches in length, these thorns. You ever pricked your finger on a rose bush or a spiky weed or something? Okay, it's smart. The skin around our head is very thin, and being attached to the skull, there's just not a whole lot of room for non-painful issues when it comes to these thorns. So think about that. 1 inch or 2 in length. Most of the head of Jesus would have been covered. Matthew chapter 27, 28 through 30 record this. I'm going to read these for a few verses to you. Oh my, where'd they go? What am I doing? 27. Sorry. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put on a scarlet robe and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand and knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spit on him, took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. And after they had mocked him, they took off the robe, put on his own clothes, and then they led him away to crucify him. Because of our brain and the fact that it uses roughly 20% of the oxygen in our entire body, there needs to be a constant flow of blood to the brain. Therefore, we can deduce that the head and scalp are the most vascular areas of the body. The entire cranium is covered in an almost infinitesimal network of capillaries, or small blood vessels. If you've ever cut your head, you know how it bleeds. This would be compounded when the soldiers would continually hit Jesus. Those thorns would be driven in deeper and deeper. Obviously, there was copious bleeding. And the pain. Think of the pain. With the entire top of the head covered now in thorns, the slightest movement or pressure to these thorns would cause pain. Along with thousands of blood vessels, there's an equal amount of nerves covering the head. Triggering or activating these nerves would bring about severe pains resembling an electric shock or a hot poker that's been heated in a fire, stabbing into the flesh. Interestingly, the pain would only last for an instant, only to reoccur if the nerve has been directly irritated in the slightest way. As long as that crown was stuck in place, these shots of pain would continue over and over again. During the walk all the way to Calvary, where the crucifixion took place, and during the crucifixion, more pain. Any movement caused by walking, falling down, talking, even a wisp of wind could send signals of torturous pain through the head and face of Jesus. This hurtful crown was forced upon Jesus' head is another layer of pain that he would have to endure. It started with the hematidrosis in the garden, continued with the terrible scourging, and now is unrelenting on the skull of Jesus with this crown of thorns. No doubt that Jesus is in a state of shock. He is suffering from early hypovolemia, which is the circulating fluids in the body, losing those at this point. This would cause weakness. He would be white like ashen, like a ghost, lightheaded, perhaps vomiting, periods of sweating. He would be unsteady on his feet. He would be struggling to breathe properly. And to think, in just a short period of time, he will actually be crucified. So this isn't even the end of it. Now remember I said the Garden of Gethsemane, there was the betrayal by Judas, the arrests, and then all of these trials, the high priest Caiaphas, Herod, and Pilate, like, who wants him? What do we do with him? Pilate says, I don't see anything wrong with him, and they go back and forth. And again, I'm not a political major, and so I can't give you all the details on all of those trials. But they took place like in the middle of the night. So something's not right here. So he's now endured a sleepless night, the flogging after now all of these crazy mock trial things that he's going through. This flogging, which will be episode 3. Horrible, just an incredibly horrible and brutal way to torture somebody. So he's already suffered through that. Now they take this crown and they take a scepter and they hit him on the head, and the thorns drive deeper into his skull, causing more pain, and like a shooting pain, and like an electric shock, and over this pain keeps washing over him, over and over him. You get the sense that what Jesus is going through is obviously not easy. It's not even difficult. It's almost impossible. Yet he did it with a willing heart. That means something. Again, episode 3 will be on the flogging. Here's what John writes In chapter 19, verse 1, he says, "Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged." That's all we have. That's all the Bible says about that. But history does tell us another story. Again, thank you for watching episode 2 of Suffering Beyond Belief. I look forward to seeing you in episode 3. Good night.